Listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts and the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never haves, then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be. Shel Silverstein. Bending, Not Breaking. Season 5, Episode 12. Harmonic Convergence. And welcome back to another episode of Bending, Not Breaking. I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
And we are jumping straight in because we don't have time to waste.
Why?
I don't know, because we're almost done with this season.
We are almost done.
3 episodes left.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Including this one?
12, 13, 14.
Okay, you're including this one. Got it.
Well, we haven't done this episode.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I got it.
We will.
I was just
Afterward.
thinking because we're
We're
doing
wasting
it.
time.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, great.
Ben?
So, hi. Welcome to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we talk about cool things like Avatar.
We do.
Specifically Korra.
We're talking about Korra.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
The Legend of Korra.
Yeah. What?
The episode today is Harmonic Convergence.
Oh, it's a good episode.
Ben, did you take notes?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course
Are you
I took
prepared for
notes.
this?
Yeah.
It seems like you're just
What are we
trying
doing?
to banter away instead of talking about the meat of the episode.
We're talking about hope today.
We are talking about hope.
Hope.
What's hope?
What is hope? That's a great question. I think many people might answer this differently.
That's
In fact,
true.
I know people answer this differently because a lot of people think that hope is a feeling.
Sure.
And a lot of people think that hope is not a feeling, but rather a process through which we kind of view our future.
A state of mind, if you will,
Yeah,
or like the actual activity of like hoping.
Yeah, I think that one could argue for all of those things.
Right.
Right? And I think it's interesting because there's a lot of conversation around time and how time is associated with hope, meaning
The herb or
no, not the herb, temporality. So like past, present, future. And
Sure.
how does hope manifest in relationship to those 3 states? And hope is pretty future oriented.
Yeah.
It's kind of rooted in your interpretation of your past, your mindful presence in your current state, and then your anticipation of the future. And I think what the story you're telling yourself about that future ultimately determines hope.
It's interesting because we've talked a lot, maybe not a lot, but we've talked before around how trauma and pain that's emotionally based can have physical changes on your body. Do we see hope as a way to potentially have the opposite effect? Do we see that the ability to hope and have hope and recognize that there's a potential for hope, does that have the ability to help with resilience? Does that have the ability to help with our body? And studies would say yes, right? Like hope
Yes.
takes away stress. It takes away stress from your heart and the way that you carry stress. Hope gives you the ability to sleep and to rest and to regain strength. And so there
Yeah.
are physical natures that are changed because of hope.
Yeah, I absolutely. There's a reason that a lot of people get hope from their spirituality, right? And that what they believe will happen after our physical existence, right? So what happens after we die? Your beliefs in regards to that will play a role in how you feel about your current state.
What
Right?
happens when I die is that we're going to cremate me. Then all of my friends and family are going to get packets of my dust.
Okay.
And we're going to have like an amazing race game across the
We're gonna
world.
throw you at
I haven't decided if it's like y'all are going to try to peg each other with packets of me, or if it's like you have to like drop off and scatter them at different locations, and you get
illegal.
like points for that. Yes, soup's I'll be dead. So
Yeah.
legality on my end.
Yeah. That's what true friends do.
Yeah, you're gonna have to sneak into Disney, and not because I love Disney, but just like
Drop it in It's a Small World.
no, I think I'll pick something a little bit more fun. You've got to try to like land it in the mouth of the Yeti on Expedition Everest, and if you miss, you have to go like get off the coaster and go get it. And
Oh yeah. Totally.
that's what I hope for.
Interesting. That's your hope.
Well,
I think
do not put me in a coffin. I don't like small spaces.
Well, I think that's important, though, that your story is kind of underlining for us is that hope is very unique to the individual.
That's a wonderful takeaway point from
Right?
that. Yeah.
Hope is unique to the individual. What you might hope for and what others might hope for are not necessarily the same.
That's very true.
And I think that our
see that in the show.
We do, and our ability to kind of grapple with that is kind of important. And how do we navigate different hopes that are manifesting?
Well, what we'll get to talk about today too is how do we provide hope to others? What happens to people when they don't see the ability to hope? Or have hope, because that's something that, if we think of students who have experienced trauma before in their lives, if they don't have a way to have hope or gain hope, that is a constant stressor that is affecting your everyday world. It makes it tough to learn if you don't have the coping skills to be able to navigate that. And so we'll talk about the importance of providing hope.
Well, but also we will inevitably also have to speak about what happens when we provide hope in such a way that is not helpful.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because when you say, "Oh,
silver lining that sucker,"
don't worry because of this, and they're like, "No, I don't believe that, so that doesn't help me at all." Then
correct.
It can be damaging.
Yeah.
Or a lot of times our hopes, the things that we are so dependent upon. For instance, if you believe, again, going back to this afterlife question, if you believe you're going to heaven, and you're like, heaven doesn't exist, then hearing that you're going to go to heaven and that they're in a better place now when someone dies,
not super helpful,
super unhelpful.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, it could be detrimental. It can be harmful to say something like that in a space where somebody's not willing to hear it. So you have to be really aware of your embedded understanding of the world.
Absolutely.
Because if you kind of force it on other people, it can be harmful instead of helpful. Super importante. All right.
Oh, yeah. Feel like we got a good base of hope?
I feel like, yeah. We haven't talked about Brene yet, but we will.
Just ruined it.
We can't not when we're talking about hope.
We made it through an entire episode without talking Brene recently.
We've done that multiple times.
No.
Yeah.
This is the first time.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
It's not the first time.
It's certainly not this episode. Brene, you want to sponsor us? You want to come hang out with us? We'd love to have you.
Yeah, she talks about hope being a function of struggle. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to note, right? That one is, if you never experience struggle,
do you ever really experience hope?
What do you have to hope for if you have not been in some sort of suffering state? And so hope naturally kind of evolves and happens when we struggle also, if you are able to kind of navigate that with your resilience plan.
Yeah.
So I just think that's worth mentioning as well.
Chatting about it. Feeling good.
So
You've got to recap, my friend.
I'm pretty sure it's your turn.
No, it's not. All you.
I'm really hoping that you're
on your mark.
Today.
Get set.
For me?
Go.
Okay, so Janora's in a bathtub, Boomy's playing the flute, Mako and Bolin are chit-chatting, then Tenzin's an angry elf, and, Asami listens to Boomy, and they fly in and fight, and then Boomy falls, and Oogie crashes, and Asami's like a pilot queen, and the
halfway
bros
there
are bending and snapping, and then, they're captured with Tome Rock, and then Unalaq gives his evil speech, and then Boomy punches the spirit, and spirit punches back, and then music saves the day, and then, Boomy gets in trouble, and it's just enough to save the day, and then Naga's held, then Kaya, and then Janora, and then Harmonic Convergence.
Did you make a legally blonde joke in your recap?
I did. I'm glad you caught that.
Was that purposeful?
Yeah, bending and snapping.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love a good bend and snap?
I totally
it works 100% of the time.
I was good for the first 20 seconds, and I realized
you're like, I'm out of time.
I'm out of time.
I'm right. I've got to scatter.
Yeah, there's a few things that I didn't cover, but we'll talk about it as we get into the meat.
Mm-hmm.
At least I'm hopeful that we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about the episode.
So, Hope, where
Hope.
did you see it, or where didn't you see it?
Yeah, because and that's a wonderful way to ask that question, because I think the absence of hope shows up several times throughout this episode.
Yeah, it does.
And we can go straight to the end.
Let's do it.
Um,
Korra's face.
yeah, right?
For that, like, 5-second pan of Korra's face.
Of
is
just,
like,
there's
there's
Vatu.
And just like, that's what hopelessness looks like. It's
That-
just like,
tree-dwelling jerk.
Yeah. I wrote that down. I was like, man, that last view of Korra's face is.
An absence of hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, like, thank goodness she's had people in her life to, like, inspire hope in the past. Because, again, I think we will see that sometimes the absence of hope can be paralyzing. I think you've probably felt that before. I think that's a feeling that people have lived through, is you get stuck in a place of,
It's not
because
worth it.
there's no hope. What do I do? Like, what's the point of me doing anything in this result?
Yeah.
But that's not how she responds in future episodes, right? So, like, and that is a function of hope, is the ability to, like, get up and make decisions and move, and we see that later. But in that moment, you have to take a second to kind of sit there and go, okay, how am I feeling about this?
And I think what you're pointing to right there is that hope is not this, like, forever thing.
No.
Like, it's not once you have it, you have it forever. Like, that's what it means when I was talking about time earlier. It's very, like, dependent upon time, right? And your past and how it informs your present and what you're looking to in the future.
Yeah.
Because in that moment, Korra was like, all of my plans were to prevent this moment from happening.
And it happened.
Now what do I do? And for that moment, she's hopeless because she hasn't had a chance to be present with what's going on.
When that ebbs and flows throughout the course of the episode, right?
Yes.
And so that speaks more to it, that it's not this constant state. We've got to attack. We've got a boat and 7 people. Okay, that feels pretty hopeless.
Yep.
Here's some things we can do. Great, a little bit of hope. All right, Here's the plan. Plan doesn't go great. I woke up in a tent, handcuffed and next to my dad, feeling pretty hopeless at this moment. We've definitely failed. Oh, we forgot Boomy's not in the tent, so a little bit of hope comes from that, and then, so it's an ebb and flow, and I think that is, anytime we're talking about human progress, emotional progress, whether it's being aware of the things that you're doing and having awareness of where you are in life, whether it is dealing with trauma, shame, guilt, grief, the trajectory of that processing event does not have to be linear, and oftentimes isn't.
No.
But I think I've definitely been in spaces before where you're like, I'm making progress, and then you don't, and then you feel guilty for kind of retracting back on the progress that you've made, and like regressing, and so I think that it's important as we talk about just anything in life when it's personal growth oriented or relationships, or that linear is kind of a joke, right? It's like, it's kind of a it's not actually what we need to be living into or expecting to live into, and hope feels like it's a lot about expectation sometimes.
Yeah,
and
anticipation of a future event.
And so for that, don't let non-linear paths take away that hope.
Well, I also think that the idea of linear is important here, because I think also what that kind of implies is that there's only one direction.
Right.
Right? And I think the part of the resilience for hope is realizing that it doesn't have to go, like, you lose hope when you're bound to certainty. And that linear concept locks you into one hope. This is the only thing I could do. And we've talked about it before. Using the word only, like when you use language like always, never, or absolutely, or, you know what I mean? Only. What you're doing is you're boxing off and you're closing options for hope.
And we see that. We see that specifically in Desna and Eska's reactions to Unalaq throughout this episode. We see their facial expressions where they start to question things that they say. Lots of back and forth. But because of that linear expectation, we see Desna, no, my dad knows what he's doing.
Trust him implicitly.
This is it. He almost let him die an episode ago, 2 episodes ago. And yet, and it's just so I think that's an example of locking ourselves into the expectation of what should be,
Yeah.
and that is not allowing for any variation. And it's also it's closing Desna and Eska off to all of the emotional experiences that they could be feeling in those moments.
Well, I would say that it's the things that they're feeling and then shoving away with this story.
Right.
Right? It's like, no, what I'm feeling isn't valid because my dad knows everything and he's the wisest guy in the world. Right? My pain, my suffering, my this is not as important. And therefore, that is the narrative that happens when we get locked into these things. Is that all of a sudden we stop listening to our bodies, right? And we stop listening to the signals that it's giving us, saying, "Hey, something's up."
And that's an example of where like hope might be harmful, right? Like not that hope is harmful, but like he is so positioned in on this one thing that must be happening that he is ignoring all these other body signs that are taking place, all these other emotions.
Yeah, hope without discernment, right, can be problematic.
Yep.
When you are hoping for something and you haven't really thought about what that implies and what that means.
Or how that affects others.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything with awareness.
Y'all.
Everything.
Let's just like
awareness, self-awareness.
Yeah, we're gonna change the name of this podcast to
aware.
Yeah.
be aware.
Cultivating awareness. Bending our awareness.
So yeah, what about for you? What's a moment of hope or absence of hope that you want to talk about and lift up?
Yeah, you almost pointed to it, specifically diving more into this hopelessness that we experience from Tenzin.
Mm-hmm.
And this is regarding Jinora. So they've just got captured. They're tied up in the tent.
Oh.
And Tenzin just says it out loud. He's like, I've done everything that I can. I'm a failure.
Jinora's lost forever.
Jinora's lost forever. And it's just like, I'm just like, oh God. And
like, no jokes aside, like,
yeah. And that in and of itself is a moment where, like, comparing similar to like Korra's face at the end of the episode, is just like, I don't know what to do. I'm out of options. And I love Kaya for this reason, because she remembers Bumi and Tenzin doesn't. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Tenzin has been in his kind of own world this whole episode, right? He was super angry at the beginning of it, made some very not helpful comments.
And I think that that stems from the hopelessness.
It stems from his hopelessness.
The
it stems
fear,
from his fear,
anxiety around never getting Jinora back, and so we see him snap on Bumi.
Yeah.
Because of that.
And I think that's what's playing into this, right? And so this is why I think, again, going back to this time reference, like our past and our understanding and our grappling with it affects how we anticipate what's coming.
Right.
And so this is an example of that. He is angry with Bumi this whole episode. He's frustrated and annoyed that Bumi keeps telling these stories that seemingly don't have a point. And I love that Kaya remembers Bumi in this moment. And I think part of that is really important for us, because when we are in our moments, when we are in our Tenzin moment, or our end of the episode Korra moment, and we are like lost without a way forward, the thing that helps is close, vulnerable conversation with people we trust, who are willing to say, hey, this is something that I'm hopeful about.
Mm-hmm. Bumi is honestly the catalyst for this entire episode.
Oh, he's the king.
This is a Bumi episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things I really appreciate about Bumi is this hopefulness, this optimism, that allows him to not be willing to try new things for the fear of failure or not working, right? He's like, I'm gonna sneak into this camp. I'm gonna play the flute. It's all gonna go all right. None of it goes as planned. But he doesn't.
The goal is still achieved.
The goal's still achieved, and,
right?
and it doesn't stop him from moving, right? It doesn't stop him from continuing to try.
Well, again,
and I think that is hope, right?
He's embodying the idea that perfect isn't the enemy of good.
Right. One of the, in the work that I do, we see counselors not try new things for the fear of failing. And Boomy does that's not an option. He's going to try it out, and if it doesn't work, great. He's going to learn from it and move on. And I really appreciate that about him in this episode. And I think that is, again, if you're cultivating optimism, hope regularly in your life, that's a byproduct of that, is that willingness to try new things and fail. And
it builds resilience because you have learned through your struggle and through your failure
that it's not the end because of it.
It's not the end, and you can bounce back. And by practicing that and incorporating that into your person, you are therefore putting it into your chemicals to let you know that, oh, this failure is not the end of the world.
And he fails a lot this episode.
And he does.
And it doesn't matter.
My favorite laugh moment is just him squaring off with the
spirit,
this dark spirit,
throws the dagger that turns around in the spirit's body and fires back out
because he screams, and I super hard chuckle at that moment because it's just and it's just really funny because he's like, all right, I'm not scared of you, I'm gonna punch you, and then he gets punched back and he's like, all right, I'm gonna change tactics. All right, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna fail miserably, I'm gonna change tactics, and he just keeps trying. And that is hope. That is exactly what it looks like to say that hope is a function of struggle.
Yep.
That's what it looks like. It's beautiful.
Oh, we give Boomy credit pretty frequently, and we're going to get a whole season of Boomy.
Thank goodness.
Here in just a few episodes. I love these moments for him. Because if there's anything that we can learn, it's that we can fail and continue trying, and he's gonna do that. It doesn't mean he's not learning. It doesn't mean he's not taking the advice of other people, though. It's hit or miss, I think, sometimes maybe with him. But for us, that failure does not mean that you don't get to continue to keep moving, and I really appreciate Boomy through this episode for that reason. Because even when he's sharing his past stories and stuff like that, he doesn't even get angry at Tenzin. You know what I mean?
I think he gets annoyed.
I think he gets hurt. I think he gets hurt. And so Asami coming in and being like, I think that we don't have, trebuchets or catapults, but we can still. But we can. That gives me a good idea.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Well, and I think that again, what Boomy is showing us with these stories is twofold. One, if I'm with Tenzin, part of me is super getting Tenzin. Boomy, that's not helpful right now.
Yeah.
I need to focus on getting this done.
I got to go get Jinora.
Right? Jinora is my only priority, and you keep talking about this random stuff that's going on. And I really understand Tenzin's perspective there. I have been there where I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you telling this story? It's not helpful. It's not necessary. But then what I love about it is from Boomy's perspective is he's like, hey, I've done this before. I'm giving myself hope by sharing this story, and maybe it'll give you hope too. That's the generous assumption that I'm offering for that, is that he's like, man, I'm going to tell this story. I've done something like this before. It feels like we can do it again. And I imagine when he shared that with his subordinates in the army or whatever he was his service, that they probably responded well to that sometimes. Tenzin doesn't. And I think that knowing our audience is important, but also him sharing these stories is vital to this episode.
Right.
Right? And I think that sharing stories and being present in the moment and reflecting on our past is all integral to how we continue to look and hope for the future.
That's what this podcast is.
Yes!
Right? We do strength finders, or it's you've participated in a Gallup study survey around things that you're good at. One of the things that falls under my strengths is input, right, which is the collection of things, and
mine too.
And this is an example of that, right? Where I love watching movies, I love reading stories, I love podcast audiobooks, all the fun stuff. And it's because I really get joy out of sharing the things that I've found or cultivated or curated in my time been like, I think that this is a movie that will speak to you, or I think that this is something that you might enjoy, or but it's because of the lessons that we can pull from it and learn from it, and a lot of times that's we do that through art, and so is that a form of cultivating hope? Is that a form for us of like, is this show us cultivating hope in ourselves?
Yeah.
But hopefully others as well.
Ideally.
But if we're doing it right. But there's an importance to that.
Yeah.
And we see that happen in this episode through Boomie's actions, through Kaya's actions, through Naga's actions, through so it's great. It's a wonderful episode. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of ebbs and flows,
Ebbs and flows.
Ebbs and the flows. Yep.
Yeah, so I want to go back to this moment with Asami and, being like, oh, that's an idea that we can use.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I noticed this time watching was Korra's response to Asami in that moment. Korra just like immediately tunes out everyone else and like looks Asami in the eye and says, tell me, what's your deal? what's your idea?
Yeah.
And Asami shares it, and Korra is like, we're gonna do it. There's such
I love that
relationship there already that I think is really important, and I think that we can't underestimate the power of hope that stems from relationship.
Yeah.
Right, and from close, intimate relationship.
Well, because you mentioned it a little bit. Tenzin's past with Boomy might have affected the way that he hoped. The opposite is true, right? Like, if you have strong relationships with others and you're cultivating those positive relationships, that's going to cultivate hope along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if I fail at this, I have a support system to lean back on, and so.
But also
exactly that.
Just to flip that a little bit, the dark side of that coin is Desna and Eska. They have that history. And of long history of Unalaq and having hope in Unalaq that has served them well for their whole lives, or well enough to get to this point. And that's also the dark side, is how relationship can create it in a way that locks us in to not seeing other opportunities. So I think it's important to, again, we must be in relationship. We must reflect on that relationship and cultivate awareness so that we can have greater discernment around what is helpful and what is not.
Mm-hmm. And then when do we need to shut off hope? When do we need to stop hope?
Tell me more.
Unalaq is hoping for a lot of things right now.
What is he hoping for? I literally wrote down, what is Unalaq hoping for?
The destruction of the world. Well, so it sounds like.
So why?
Right.
This is.
It sounds like he's wanting a complete blend of spirits and humans coexisting together.
And it seems like,
which is like, you sit there and you go like, cool.
Yeah. And
that feels good.
That's what I like about Korra so much, is that we see this concept. Unalaq is taking it way further but Korra's going to live in it and sit in the fact that, no, Unalaq had a lot of things right. Right?
So tough
Amon
to do.
had a lot of things right. Zahir is going to have a lot of things right. Kuvira is going to have a lot of things right. And then she's going to end up like really going to where it feels right for her as she makes these decisions. Like, I'm going to leave the spirit portal open. This is a decision, like, spoiler alert. But like, it's one of those things where I think that those decisions are so important.
Yeah, but how do you challenge that? How do you challenge that hope, right? Like,
your hope's wrong.
Yeah, well, it is. And there's an element to kind of say, hey, you're willing to do this, so we're not really going to try to bring you back to the middle. That's not really a space we're in right now.
Let's everybody be a moderate.
Yeah. No, like, it's bad. It's pretty bad.
No, this is bad.
But how do we challenge that? How do we have that conversation? How do we have those moments of, hey, have you thought about what you're hoping for and why that may not be a positive thing for others that are involved?
Well, you know what I'm thinking of in that moment is you can't logic your way out of something that someone didn't logic their way into.
Correct.
And we see this conversation in the tent this episode where Tone Rock is going off and say, "What about your family? What about this? What about that?" And Korra is saying, "What you're thinking and why are you doing this and why?" And those conversations are happening, and he's not listening. He's like, "I have already made up my mind." So I think for me,
He might be too far gone at this point.
well, I think again, certainty is a red flag.
Yes.
Is a red flag for me. Anytime you are certain that this is how it will be and this is the best thing for the world and I am the only one, it's like that's red flag behavior.
What I'm also hearing is that just with anything else, having people that you're in relationship with that you trust that can kind of check you or that you feel confident and be able to give feedback is a big part of that, even for hope, right?
Yes.
I hope to go to Hawaii. Well, here's several reasons why traveling to Hawaii right now might not be something that is beneficial for
anyone,
you and others, right?
Yeah.
So, and so how do we keep people in that? It sounds like a relationship might be a great way to do that.
It does, and it really strikes me as like we can't be a standalone complex and expect to do everything right. We have to have community, and we have to have at least a few voices in our corner that we trust that are willing to speak truth to our mistakes.
To your hopes.
Feedback is necessary.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we will turn into Unalaq.
Yeah.
And it may be not on that grand a scale, but like on a minor scale even.
And then here's the other challenge. Do you view Mako as not speaking to Korra about their relationship as a way to not like rip hope away from someone or like put an automatic negative like this is not the time for that type of conversation right now. We got bigger focuses right now.
I'm glad you lift that up because that's so important because everybody's like not happy with Mako basically all the time.
He should have said it. He should have had a conversation with them like right when she came back from the.
I don't deny that.
That I get. But right now is not a time for like I don't know if I was Mako I'd be like this doesn't seem like the best time.
It's not important right now compared to.
And it's not because she just blew off the head of a scarecrow, but like or punching bag dummy, but it's because this is not.
We are hours away from an event that is going to
potentially
turn
change the world forever, right?
Right.
So, our relationship might not be the thing that we need to chat about in this moment.
I really don't blame him here. I really don't. The most generous assumption is that that's what he's thinking about. He's like, this is important.
That's how I took it. That's how
I don't think it's this important for right now.
I don't think he didn't do it because out of awkwardness. I think he didn't do it because we're on a boat right now to go hopefully save the world. I think that's what it felt like to me. But what it does remind me, and this doesn't remind me, but the conversation does, is, when do we allow hope to exist because of the positive reactions to hope, even in moments where we know that that might not be helpful. It's not grounded in reality.
I've been working a lot with people dying recently in my work, and one of the things that I have realized is that people at the end of life in that liminal space often, and not always, but certainly often have a hope that the family doesn't necessarily agree with, or an example might be like, oh well, I'm going to heaven, and so I'm going to a better place, and the atheist in the corner son is like, no, you're not. And I sit there and I'm like, oh,
just let him have it.
Just let him have that little bit of hope there. And I think that's an example, but that happens on a much smaller scale and in different locations and in different situations, right? Where is it really bad to just let them have that moment where this is what they're holding on to, right? Because what it feels like is that is a support structure that's keeping you stable. And when someone tries to knock down that hope, even though they think that it's like, that's an unstable house anyway, because that board is about to break, don't kick it. until you have another support structure under there.
Yes, I was about to
that
jump
can help in.
Yep.
Right? Don't kick down the support structure unless you have something to replace it.
And that kind of goes back to Mako, right? Like that. Like, I'm not going to kick this support down until there are other supports in place.
Yeah.
This is not the time for that conversation. That support is good enough for right now. We're going to let it be for a second.
Yeah.
And so that's, very much so.
And also, don't assume that what you're replacing it with
is better.
Yep. Right? Don't be that person that, like, let me rip that out from under you and give you something that I think is better.
And that gets lifted up in what you mentioned earlier, and silver lining it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry Janora's gone, but
at least you have 2 other kids.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
3 now, right? 3 now.
There's 3 total.
No, there's 4.
Oh, he has
Rohan,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Baby, little baby, little itty baby. But exactly right. Like that's not a. Oh, I'm sorry about Janora, but at least you have 3 other great kids.
Oh,
super unhelpful.
That's not empathetic at all. That's what you call an empathic miss.
Yep.
We cover those in the gifts of imperfection.
But and so that is those moments of I'm going to replace the structure with what is beneficial for me because I don't want to feel icky or uncomfortable, and so I'm silver lining something.
No, don't do that.
But that's taught as a way of how to cultivate hope, and I would say that is typically viewed as like, oh, if I silver lining this thing, I'm cultivating hope, and the reality is it's not.
Well, and I think that's really something that you're lifting up that's really important, because we assume through culture and through what we like the videos we see that what builds hope is like, oh, let me give you this hope pill that you can take and it'll make everything better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that it doesn't work that way, right? What happens is what builds hope is sitting in another person's darkness and not turning on the light, not giving them that pill, and instead letting them find it for themselves,
mm-hmm.
right? And I'm going to sit with you in this, and
so you're not alone.
I know it hurts. I know it sucks. I know it's really, I hate it here, and I'm with you in it.
So almost like give a man a fish, teach a man to fish type moment, right? Not exactly.
Same logic, but like, yeah, I guess.
You're helping other people learn to consistently cultivate hope for themselves when you're able to sit with someone.
Yeah, and I think that's what it does is it builds resilience,
mm-hmm.
right? When people are able to sit in discomfort and sit in pain and then see that they can get out of it and make it to the other side, that's resilience building. It's hope building. It's doing what Boomy was doing and failing and then bouncing back, right?
Yeah. Oof. Took out a whole tent city.
Yeah, he went
compound.
He went after it.
Yep.
Music saves the day every time.
No, it didn't.
Especially in Korra. Man, music in Korra slaps.
Yep. So good. Can you imagine the hopelessness you would feel flying up to the portal and then realizing like
surrounded
by
dark spirits and
Chris, can you fly into the top of the spirit portal and get to the same place?
Spirits all the way up there too, though.
Not all the way up. I'm saying you really get some altitude. You fly Oogie into that sucker. Where do you pop out of, That's the question I want answered. Why could you not just go all the way up? You didn't have to enter on the ground level.
I think we need to consider is how
maybe you
high
do.
Can bison fly? Is there a cap to how high? And the reason I ask is like once it gets to a certain altitude.
I'm sure there's an atmospheric.
Is there an atmospheric change that they can't handle?
Or would you drop all the way through the spirit? Like when you go in, is it kind of like a ditch? Or is there like the gateway, the doorway only at the very bottom? And so if you did fly into the top, you'd have to go,
elevator down.
30-foot fall?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's what I want to know.
Well, maybe Avatar Studios will create a little scene in
We'll
which
see.
they answer that question.
Any other big moments of hope that you want to talk about?
No.
All right, me either.
Great.
Yeah.
We did it.
Well, we got more stuff to do, and so we will be right back after this little break.
are back, and we are excited to tap into our new segment. This week, we are calling it
Yeah.
Locks and Keys. Not locks as in smoked salmon, but locks as in Locks.
Do love smoked salmon.
Yeah. Me too.
Put it on a bagel with some capers
but it
and some
wouldn't
cream
work here
cheese.
because lock in this case is
Some red
not
onions
good.
that have been like
A little bit of a macerated, right?
a little bit of like a pickled red onion.
Love it. Yeah, but locks this time are things that are locked, right?
Pickling
Locked
red
out.
onions is a great way to like not let your onions go bad,
It is.
and because they're pretty versatile.
Yeah.
Salads.
It's kind of like the key to success and not wasting your onion, right? Key being positive.
I need to get better about like using the stuff I cook with, the excess stuff, and putting it in like a stock.
You're really locking yourself out of your future goals here by not doing that. Yeah.
Space and time.
Yep. Locks and keys, friends. Locks and keys. So for our locks, our lows, and for our keys, our highs. So, Sunshine.
Yeah.
What was one of your moments, your lock or your key?
Yeah,
And
my lock.
Tell us about it.
My lock moment is I want more accountability for Tenzin's reaction to Boomy on the boat.
Interesting. I
I
agree. It wasn't even addressed.
Like it wasn't. It was pretty much ignored by the group. And Asami comes in and is like, actually, that gives me a good idea. But no one was like, hey, either one. Hey, like Tenzin, how can we support you? I love that question, but also at the same time, like, hey, Tenzin, that was uncalled for.
Well, and I think it's hard because I think
Everyone's on a high
understands-
stress moment.
Well, everybody understands where Tenzin's coming from.
Yeah.
That's the generous assumption there is
For
that
sure.
they think that like I'm gonna offer some grace here and not lift this up.
I don't know if that's grace. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I think because empathy, understanding is just a part of accountability, right? Like, so lifting it up that, like, hey, that wasn't okay. I understand how you're feeling.
I love you.
We've got to process that differently.
Yeah.
Because you could see the hurt, the pain, the surprise all on Boomy's face in that moment.
You do, and they did that very well artistically.
Because
showing us
he
that.
looked hurt.
Yeah.
And so
No, I agree.
that's kind of my low point. I wanted a little more of a, hey, love you, understand where you're coming from. You can't do that.
Well, and I think
Right.
that's. Well, I don't want to make it even worse because I know how bad it's going. That we often think about that when we talk about accountability too, right? And I think that but I don't really want to hold them accountable because it'll make them uncomfortable. It'll make me uncomfortable. It's a whole comfortable situation, and do it anyway.
So I'm arguably in like one of my strongest relationships of all time currently. I say that because we're getting married here in this year. And something that has been a part of that relationship that has not necessarily been a part of previous ones is the ability to say, I love you. I understand where you're coming from. I didn't love how you presented that, or I didn't love how you lifted that up.
Yeah.
And I would argue that alone is one of the reasons that this is, we're strong in the way that we communicate in our relationship is because of a willingness by both parties to kind of say, totally understand why you're feeling that way. I need you not to speak to me that way again, please. Or I didn't love how that came out.
Yeah.
And I think if we start cultivating that in ourselves, in our relationships, that's
hard.
cultivating hope.
It's
like
hard.
that is cultivating hope for navigating those situations in the future.
Is.
Yeah. And so I want a little bit more of that for Tenzin
And that's
here.
again, it goes back to this concept of function.
Feedback
Is a function of respect.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my meh moment.
Your kind of locked you out
Yeah.
of the episode. Yeah.
It really did. What about you?
It's kind of similar actually, but not the same moment.
Mhm.
It's kind of not the inverse, but my low moment for this is no people like listening to Boomy. And so
We're very protective of Boomy this episode.
yeah,
It's because he does things really well. I really liked Boomy this episode.
And it's not just Tenzin, right? The collective is not sticking up for Boomy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's commenting on similar things, but from a different perspective. Like Boomy is undervalued, and he doesn't receive an apology. And in any way, and I really wish he did, because at the end we see that what he does is he starts to tell a story, and Tenzin asks, "Hey, how did you do it?" And Boomy's like, "Nah, you wouldn't believe me anyway."
Mm-hmm.
And my heart broke a little bit because
that's what happens. Like his past experience
this is
told
what
him
it looks
that.
like.
Yep, said
right?
that this is how it's going to respond. He was not hopeful that that was going to be received well.
Yeah. So that kind of hurt my heart a little bit.
No.
It kind of made me feel all locked in.
If we could just hug Boomy this episode.
I know. I didn't want to hug Boomy.
A moment I like, again, I like very much Naga and the way that she shows up for Boomy and the way that she shows up in the tent.
Slam!
One of the things one of my critiques with Korra as a show is that the animals that took place in Avatar, The Last Airbender, Momo and Appa, had such massive personalities that really drove throughout the entirety of this show. And I feel like we are missing a little bit of that in the way that Naga and even Pabu get portrayed. Like, they have their moments, but they're few and far between.
There are certainly less interactions.
And so I really, when they do show up, it's always a pleasant.
We don't really
for me.
get, like, we got a whole episode dedicated to Appa.
Mm-hmm.
We got a whole, like mini episode in the next in Tales of Ba Sing Se with Momo and their relationship. They were a little bit more integral to the full story than.
Well, even the way they're introduced and the way that they show up in Avatar, Momo not understanding the needs of Sokka when Sokka's sick, right? Like, you get these long-winded stories about these characters that we really don't get much of Pabu and Naga, and so when they do show up,
it's nice.
It's nice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So you feel like they have the key for success for you?
That was. I hate you.
Mine.
That was my high.
Yeah.
Or one of my highs.
Your key.
Mm-hmm.
Stick to theme here.
Oh my goodness.
Boomy's music. I love this beginning where Kaya and Janora are in this like healing bath relationship here, and then we see Boomy, who is just playing the flute.
Love it.
Enjoying his time and being present with his
Chekhov's
music.
flute.
It's just like I had a moment the other day where I sat down at the piano and was playing and singing for the first time in a long time, just because I've been so distracted with life that I haven't let myself do that. And it was just very cathartic. And I love that Boomy kind of reminded me of that, and I miss it. And it ended up being a really important part to him being successful in this episode. And so I think that it reminded me.
Love the little dancing spirit.
Yeah, that was fun. All right.
Devotion.
Devo time.
Element of air.
Air.
What's your intention? You want to go first? You want me to go first?
I would like you to go first.
Okay. Hope is interesting to get with air because that already kind of feels on theme. You know what I mean? Like, hope itself can be very uplifting and bring a lot of life and give a lot of breath to experiences. And so it already just felt like that fit, which was nice. I think for me, one of the things that I would like to do is this week is put intention around kind of a thoughtful moment or a meditative period each morning. And what I want to think about is, what does it feel like to me when someone is cultivating hope with me? What does it feel like when I'm on the receiving end of that? What does my body do? How do I respond? And then also think about, what are the things that when I'm cultivating hope in others that I'm doing? Like, what does that feel like so that I can continue to replicate those moments? But then have an intention of, what does it feel like if I'm doing the opposite? What is the feeling of me ripping hope away from someone? When do I do that? What emotional state am I in when that happens? And so I want to take time this week to really think on those things so that I can be better about cultivating hope in the future.
I love it.
Yeah.
That was very thoughtful. Look at you.
Yeah.
When you were talking, I started thinking about, like, what about, like, dead air and stagnant air? And it's not very hopeful. But I was like, oh, there's other types of hope, too. It's not very helpful. And I was like, anyway, I was rolling with the metaphor. It was interesting. For me, my intention, I kept on going back to this phrase of you have to both inhale and exhale.
Yeah.
You can't just keep doing one. You will run out.
Yes.
If you inhale only, you will
either run out of space. Yep.
Or if you exhale only, you will run out of air. And so it is a balance between this inhale and exhale. And when I think about hope, I think about balance too, because if I hope too much to the point where there is no action, it'll get done, then it won't get done because there's no accountability there. If I'm hopeful to the point where, I need to do something, and then I'm going to do as much as I can to the point where it's then out of my hands, that feels way better for me. So I think for me, as I think about this inhale, exhale balance and hope, is kind of analyzing over this next week, what are the things that I want, that I'm looking forward to, that I'm hopeful about, and ask myself, what am I not doing that I could be to make that happen? And because I need to partially do the work to make that happen.
Yeah.
And so I want to be critical of the things that I'm just taking for granted will happen. And I want to be mindful of that this week. So I'm going to take some time to reflect on that and be present with that. And then that might lead to some uncomfortable things that might need to shift in my daily life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful that we shared. And now we're going to be even more grateful in
Gratitude.
our gratitude segment.
Gratitude.
A great attitude, but a better practice. Because you have to practice. It can't just be an attitude.
You got an attitude of gratitude, which is pretty ratitude.
Yeah. Wow, yeah. I want to talk about Kaya. Kaya
pretty rad.
is who I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
For many reasons. And I think part of it is about the moment we discussed earlier, where she was sitting with Tenzin, and it wasn't it'll be fine, Boomy's out there. It was like body language and tone of voice, and you could tell that she was sitting in that darkness too.
Mm-hmm.
And she was saying that I have hope, and I want to offer that to you as well. And I thought that the way she did it was very generous. So I'm grateful for Kaya.
It's got to be Boomy for me. It's a Boomy day.
Boomy's the win.
We're celebrating Boomy.
Yeah. Easily could have picked Boomy.
Today's the day for all the reasons we've discussed. I think when it comes to cultivating hope, he was a shining example of that throughout the course of this day.
Yeah, Boomy was like a lighthouse.
Yeah. Shows others the way when the way is dark.
Yeah, kind of like hope. Hope is a lighthouse.
Hope's a lighthouse. Anything's real. Empathy, Boomy, tattoos, coffee. You can put any word in front of that. It's one of my favorite quotes and devotions. I'm sharing that with you all.
Poop is a lighthouse.
Poop is a Hey, poop, you learn a lot from poop. Everyone has to poop. There's a whole book about it. It's good poop is. It
shows the way when the way is dark.
A good poop is hopeful. I think it gives us a lot of information about our health. We love a good poop.
Feels good to get everything out, you know?
I am marrying a doctor of physical therapy who specializes in
poop,
pelvic floor, bowel function. Yeah. We love a good poop.
Yeah. This took a turn.
I think it's just we're learning.
Yeah.
We're all out there learning.
Yeah, learning is a lighthouse.
Yeah, learning is a lighthouse. Shows others the way when the way is dark.
All right, everybody. If you want more jokes, you can find us at BNB_pod.
Here we are, supposed to be grown-ups, but we're still talking about poop.
BNB_pod on all the things. We have several tiers on our Patreon for anybody who wants different kinds of interactions with us. So if you're curious about that, check Patreon out. We also do a monthly live episode with our patrons. Any of our patrons who are supporting can join. So that's always a blast. And we have one coming up this month soon. So we're really excited to have you join us if you want. That'd be great. But if not, you can always just head on over to that review and give us a lovely 5-star review, and we will greatly appreciate that also. If you feel so compelled, we would love that.
All right. Well, I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
And this has been Bending, Not Breaking. Thank you for listening.